person consider taking antidepressants?
A person should consider taking antidepressants when the 5 areas of therapeutic self-care we talked about earlier aren't working. It's your kind of your backup tool. And so when you're doing the right things and you're still feeling crummy and you still can't get out of bed and you're still sleeping, your sleeping is still messed up and your biochemistry, is messed up and you feel like crap, then a prescription may be helpful.
Okay. And what are the different kinds of antidepressants?
Well, all antidepressants work theoretically because they're rebalancing the chemical structure in your brain, the neurotransmitters. There are 3 basic classes. The first are called the tricyclic antidepressants. They came around in the 1950s when I was growing up. Things like Elavil and Tofranil, the Zipramine, Pamelor, things that probably your listeners haven't heard of because they're hardly used, but they're just as effective as the newer drugs. The second ones are even more obscure. They're called the MAO inhibitors, Nardil and Parnate, but the ones that most people have heard of are the SSRIs, Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, Celexa, Lexapro. These are the ones that basically target the neurotransmitter serotonin, the feel-good one. And there's a 4th class, they're called atypical, Effexor and Cerazone and Wellbutrin fall in that class. So as you can see, there's a whole bunch to choose from. Now here's the key. No one knows which ones are going to work until you try them. You've been through this, right? It is all a bunch of trial and error. I went to the top psychiatrist in Portland when I was really struggling, and he said to me, no psychiatrist likes to say this, but you're all a bunch of guinea pigs. We don't know what's going to happen until you take the drug. But there's a lot to choose from.
What should I expect when I first take an antidepressant?
Well, the first thing you should expect is that you're not going to get high. It's not something that gets you high like a drug or alcohol. Now, interestingly enough, the father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, thought he had found a cure for depression when he took a substance called cocaine, right? Because we've all heard of it, right? Maybe some of us have even taken it. But what does cocaine do? It's a stimulant, right? When a person is depressed, are they happy? Do they have energy? Or no, just the opposite, right? So he took this stuff and he said, oh my God, I can't believe how up I am. I can't believe all the wonderful thoughts I'm having. I can't believe how little sleep I need. I can't believe how productive I am. This is the cure. This is the cure of depression. He even wrote a paper on this. Unfortunately, a paper on cocaine. Unfortunately, then he discovered the problem with cocaine and other stimulants like it. What goes up must come down. He should have consulted Isaac Newton, right? So that's not how antidepressants work. Unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, it's much more subtle than that. But it takes 4 to 6 weeks for them to really kick into place. So during that initial time, you're going to have to be patient. Oftentimes there are side effects that you have to get through first. Usually they'll go away in 3 or 4 days. For those antidepressants where there's a lot of stimulation or activation that happens, sometimes psychiatrists will give you a tranquilizer like Xanax or Klonopin or Ativan to take the edge off. Sometimes you have to add a second one, have a cocktail. Sometimes you're starting like at 20 milligrams of Prozac and you have to bump it to 30 or 40. So it's really, it's hit and miss, trial and error, as I said earlier. But you have to give it time.
All right. How long should I take my medication for?
You should take your medication as long as you need to. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, as I said just before, that it takes time for these things to work, and you oftentimes just have to tinker around. So let's assume that now it's 2 months down the line and you're starting to feel better. You're coming back to your old self. You feel you're old, your energy is coming back, your sleeping is better, maybe even your sense of humor. Some of your listeners or viewers may relate to this, but when I was really depressed, I lost my ability to laugh. That's like a curse when you can't even, laugh at a good joke or a funny movie. So as all that starts to come back, then you have to make a really critical decision. Do I continue taking the antidepressant or do I stop, right? You've been just dealing with that recently, right? So normally what will happen is when the person starts to feel better, they start to think, okay, maybe I don't need it. Now if you're going to go off an antidepressant, make sure you do it under the auspices or the direction of a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner. Do not go cold turkey. Some of them, like Paxil, you can have some really bad side effects. So you taper off, and when people do that, I've observed in my clinical practice, 1 of 3 things happens. 1, you go off the antidepressant and then you're still stable and you never have another episode. The second possibility is you go off the antidepressant, you're stable, but maybe 6 months later, or a year or 2 years later, it comes back, because depression, for the most part, is a recurrent disorder. In that case, you go back on the antidepressant or try something else, and usually you can restabilize. The third option or possibility, which doesn't happen very often, but I've seen it happen, is you go off the antidepressant within a month, or not even a month, within days or weeks, you're feeling messed up again, and then you have to go back on. So some people have to stay on an antidepressant for a long period of time, even though they would rather not. Some people can never go back on it, and some people can be off it for a while and then come back later on. So there's all these possibilities. You don't know what's going to happen until you take them, but the thing is, take them till you feel better, and if you feel like tapering off, talk to your doctor and see what you guys can do.